Picture a castle where nothing is allowed to leave. Not the servants, not the letters, not even the smell. Now fill it with a dead queen. Add a coffin of lead so heavy that 8 men strain to shift it an inch, a summer heat pressing against shuttered windows, corridors where nobody speaks above a whisper, and a garrison of soldiers whose only job is to guard a body that has already been dead for 5 months. That's Fotheringhay Castle in the summer of 1587. The most famous prisoner in Europe was executed here in February, and she is still here, still in the building, sealed in lead, resting on trestles in an empty chamber, waiting for a government that cannot decide what to do with her. A place where you could hear the skylarks over the meadows in the morning and hear the guards checking the locks on a dead woman's door by evening. We're going back there tonight, not as historians reading state papers, we're living it. One person, inside those walls, through the strangest funeral England ever staged. Everything they would have seen, smelled, heard, and carried. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just quietly fascinated by lead coffins and midnight processions. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. Here is the problem you were never trained for. You are guarding a queen who is already dead, and you're not allowed to bury her. That is your job now. That has been your job since the 8th of February. And nobody, not your master, not the castle's keeper, not the Privy Council in London, can tell you when it will end. Your name is Thomas Reeve. You are 16 years old, and you came to Fotheringhay 2 years ago from a village near Oundle, 4 miles down the River Nene, with a spare shirt, a good knife your father ground sharp on the doorstep the morning you left, and a letter promising you a place in the household of Sir Amyas Paulet's establishment as a scullion and errand boy. Back home, everyone said service in a great castle would make a man of you. They weren't wrong, they just didn't say what kind. Because Fotheringhay is not a great castle anymore. It is a prison that happens to have towers, and since February it has been something stranger than a prison. It has been a tomb with a garrison. You were in the castle the day she died. You did not see the scaffold. The great hall was for gentlemen, for witnesses, for the men whose names would go into the official record. You were in the kitchen passage carrying wood, and you remember the sound more than anything. Not a scream, nothing like that. A kind of collective exhalation from behind the hall doors, 300 people letting out their breath at once, and then, a heartbeat later, the castle's own silence rushing back in, thicker than before. They say the executioner held up her head, and the auburn hair came away in his hand because it was a wig, and the head that dropped was grey and cropped short. The head of an old woman, though she was only 44. You didn't see it. But the man who mopped the hall floor saw it, and he told the cook, and the cook told everyone, and now it lives in your skull whether you want it there or not. They burned everything that day. That's the part people don't know. Every cloth that touched her blood, the black gown, the red petticoat she wore underneath, red, the colour of Catholic martyrdom chosen on purpose, one last argument made in fabric. All of it went into the great fireplace in the hall, and you were one of the boys feeding the fire, because blood-soaked relics of a martyred queen are worth money and worth rebellion, and the government wanted nothing left that a pilgrim could kiss. You remember the smell of burning wool and burning velvet, greasy and sharp, a smell that clung to your hair for 2 days. You remember the heat on your face, and the strange feeling of destroying the most expensive clothing you had ever touched. Even a little dog was washed over and over, because it had crept under her skirts and come out soaked in blood, and nobody knew what to do with a dog that had become a relic. And then the surgeons came, and the body was opened and embalmed, the organs taken out and buried secretly deep at night somewhere inside the castle. You genuinely do not know where, and you have stopped trying to guess. And what remained was wrapped and folded into a coffin of lead, and the lead was sealed, and the coffin was carried into an empty chamber off the great hall and set on trestles covered in black cloth. And there it stayed. February, March, April, May, June, July. You're living in a building with a dead queen, and the government of England has simply left her here, like a debt nobody wants to collect. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you, the smell. It's not one smell, it's layers. Tallow smoke from the rushlight that guttered out sometime in the night, greasy and mutton sweet. Damp stone, the mineral cold of walls 8 feet thick that have never once been warm in the 2 years you've slept against them. Old rushes on the floor, gone soft and sour underfoot, overdue for changing since Easter. Somewhere below, the kitchen's ghost, yesterday's pottage, boiled bones, the faint char of the bread oven, and underneath it all, the smell of bodies. The 4 other servants in this attic room, the wool that's been slept in too many nights. You, 16 years old and unwashed since Sunday, part of the smell yourself. Welcome to Fotheringhay Castle, Northamptonshire, in the last week of July, 1587. You're lying on a straw pallet in the servants' garret above the buttery, under the roof beams where the summer heat collects like water in a low field. Beside you, close enough that his elbow finds your ribs twice a night, is Ned Hobbs, the other kitchen boy, 14, from Fotheringhay village itself. A boy who snores like a man 3 times his size. Yeah, you share a pallet. Everyone at your level does. Privacy is for gentlemen, and there are no gentlemen in this room. The light through the gap in the shutter is grey gold. Dawn, or just before it. Which means the bell will ring soon. And Mistress Crow, who rules the kitchen the way a captain rules a ship, will have your hide if the fires aren't lit when the cook comes down. But you lie still for one more moment, because this is the only moment of the day that belongs to you, and you listen. And this is the thing about Fotheringhay in July of 1587. You listen for the castle, and the castle gives you almost nothing back. A castle this size should be loud by now. Should be grooms shouting in the yard, carts on the causeway, the armoury clattering, dogs, geese, the whole rolling machinery of a great household grinding into motion. Instead, there is the river. The Nene sliding past below the walls, low and slow with summer, making that endless small conversation with the reeds. There are swifts screaming somewhere above the roof, tearing circles around the keep. There is one pair of boots crossing the inner yard, a measured, unhurried tread, heel and sole on cobble, and you know without looking that it is one of the watch, walking the circuit he has walked all night, because the castle is not empty. That's the strange part. The castle is full of soldiers, and half dead with silence at the same time. Since February there have been a guard here day and night, not to keep anyone in. The prisoner is past escaping, and not really to keep anyone out, but to guard the fact of her. The body. The situation. Nobody has ever explained it to you in words, because nobody explains anything to a scullion. but you've understood it the way servants understand everything sideways from fragments. The government fears the body, fears what happens if Catholics steal it, fears what happens if it's buried too grandly, and fears what happens if it's buried too meanly. Fears France, where she was once queen, fears Scotland, where her son is king, fears Spain, whose ships, the carters bring this word up the road from Woundle with every load of flour, Spain, whose ships are building in their hundreds. So they guard her, and they wait, and the whole castle waits with them, and the waiting has a smell too. You'd swear it does. Snuffed candles and shut rooms. Get up, Thomas. You get up. The floorboards are gritty under your bare feet, and warm. The one place in the castle that's warm, this attic under the leads, and by afternoon it will be an oven. You pull on your shirt, coarse hemp linen gone soft with wear at the collar, and stiff with old sweat everywhere else, and your breeches, and you push your feet into shoes whose leather has moulded to your feet so completely that they're less like shoes now, and more like a second, harder skin. Your one good thing hangs on the nail by the pallet. A jerkin of brown leather given to you at Christmas from the household stores, and it marks you as a castle servant rather than a village boy, and appearances matter, even here, even now, even in a house of the dead. Ned groans, surfaces, says what he says every single morning. Is it raining? It is not raining. It has not rained in 3 weeks. You tell him so, and he groans again as if the good weather were a personal injury, and the day begins. Down the twisting back stair, hand on the rope worn smooth by 80 years of hands, past the second floor landing where the air changes. You've never gotten used to that, the way the air changes on the second floor landing, because the back stair passes within 30 feet of the chamber where she lies, and though there are 2 doors and a corridor between you and the coffin, the whole of that floor is kept shuttered, and shuttered rooms in summer breathe a particular breath, still, cool, faintly sweet with beeswax, because candles are kept burning in the chamber. You've seen the chandlery accounts stack up, wax going in week after week for a room nobody lives in, and under the beeswax, very faint, something resinous. The embalmer's spices. Myrrh, someone said. You don't know what myrrh is. You know what it smells like now, though. It smells like a door you walk past quickly. The soldiers on that corridor change their watch at dawn. As you pass the landing, you hear them at it. The low exchange of words, the shift of a halberd butt on the floorboards, the small percussion of keys. 2 men guarding a locked room containing a sealed coffin containing a dead woman, handing the duty to 2 other men, as they have done every dawn for 170 days. You count things. It's a habit. It's how you keep the strangeness at arm's length. 170 days. Down into the kitchen, where the banked fire waits under its blanket of ash like an animal pretending to sleep. The kitchen at Fotheringhay is a cavern, stone-vaulted, 40 feet long, with 2 hearths big enough to stand up in, and a bread oven set into the wall like a second, smaller mouth. In the great days, and there were great days, a king of England was born in this castle, Richard III in 1452, in a chamber they still call the King's Lodging, though nobody lodges there now. In the great days this kitchen fed 300 people twice a day. Now it feeds perhaps 60. The reduced household, the guard, the officers, a kitchen built for a court, cooking for a garrison. Half the spits hang unused on the wall, and the copper pans on the high shelf have a bloom of dust on them that Mistress Crow pretends not to see, because seeing it would mean admitting what the castle has become. Your first work of the day, is the same as every day. And your hands do it before your mind is properly awake. Kneel at the great hearth, rake back the ash blanket with the iron, the handle cold, then warm, then hot along its length, and you know exactly where to hold it. 3 hands up from the end. Find the embers underneath, dull orange eyes opening in the grey. Feed them. Dry first, which catches with the sound like someone crumpling paper, then kindling split thin, then the split oak billets, and lean in and blow steady, low from the belly, and feel the heat bloom against your face and dry your eyes, and sit back on your heels as the fire takes hold and begins to roar softly in the throat of the chimney. Your knees know the shape of these hearthstones. Your palms are cross-hatched with the small healed burns of 2 years of this work, and there is a fresh one on the back of your right wrist, a tight pink line where a spitting log caught you on Tuesday, and it pulls when you flex your hand, a small bright wire of pain that you've stopped noticing except when you notice it. Water next. The well in the inner yard, 40 turns of the windlass per bucket. You've counted, you count things, and the rope wet and fibrous under your palms, and the bucket coming up beaded and cold, and the sweet mineral shock of well water smell in a summer dawn. 6 buckets to fill the kitchen cisterns. By the 4th your shoulders are burning pleasantly. By the 6th the sun has cleared the curtain wall and laid a stripe of gold down the eastern face of the keep. That strange old keep shaped like a fetterlock, a horseshoe, the shape of the padlock on a shackle, because the Yorks who built it put their badge into the very plan of the building, the falcon and the fetterlock, and you have lived here 2 years and it still unsettles you a little. A castle whose foundation is the shape of a lock. The village boys used to say the castle was built to hold something in. They meant it as a ghost story. Lately it has stopped feeling like one. Bread. Ale drawn from the buttery cask, small ale, weak and sour sweet. The taste of every morning of your life. You eat standing up in the passage out of the way because kitchen boys do not sit at the board, and you watch the household assemble itself around you. The cook, Master Digby, heavy and deliberate, sweating already. The maids from the dairy, the yeomen of the guard drifting through in twos to collect their ration, big men with London voices bored in the way that soldiers are bored, which is to say dangerously, itching for anything to happen. And this morning, something is going to happen. You can feel it before you can name it the way you feel weather. It's the horses. You hear them while you're scouring the first of the breakfast pots. That ringing, gritty labour, sand and ash and river flag scrubbing against tinned copper. Your fingers pruned and stinging where the lye finds the cracked skin at your knuckles. You hear iron shoes on the causeway, more than one horse coming fast, and the challenge from the gate. And then the yard is suddenly full of voices with a tightness in them. Riders from London. Riders from London have come perhaps a dozen times since February, and every time the castle has flinched, and every time nothing has followed. But this time Mistress Crow comes into the kitchen with her lips pressed thin and white, and she looks around the room, at the cook, at the maids, at you, and she says, "There's to be a household meeting after dinner. Master Melvin's orders. All of us." Andrew Melvin, the dead Queen's own steward, one of the small knot of her Scottish servants who were never sent home, who have been held here with her, with it, all these months, half prisoners themselves, kept in their own wing, seen at a distance, a household within the household wearing mourning that has gone rusty black with wear. Master Melvin does not give orders to the castle staff. Master Melvin has no authority over anyone but grief. unless something has changed. What is it? Master Digby asks, and Mistress Crow does something you have never seen her do. She sits down, on the meal chest abruptly, like her knees have been unstrung. They're moving her, she says. The Queen of Scots. They're taking her to Peterborough, to the cathedral. There's to be a burial at last. She looks at her own hands, and it's to be done at night. And there it is. The whole kitchen has gone still. The maids frozen with dishes in their hands, the fire talking to itself in the silence. And you stand there with a half-scoured pot heavy in your grip, sand gritting under your fingers, and you feel two things at once, so tangled you can't pull them apart. Relief, because it's ending. The long wrongness of the shuttered floor is ending. And dread, cold and specific, because the words at night have snagged in you like a hook. Nothing good in this castle has ever happened at night. Let me stop the story for a moment and tell you what has actually been happening, out beyond the walls, in the world you can't see from the kitchen passage. Because Thomas doesn't know most of this. Thomas knows rumour and fragments. But you, listening in the dark 4.5 centuries later, you can know the whole of it, and it makes the strangeness stranger. When Mary Stuart's head came off on the 8th of February, 1587, the government of England discovered it had solved one problem and created another. The living Mary had been a threat for 19 years. A Catholic queen with a claim to Elizabeth's throne, the magnet for every plot, the name whispered in every conspiracy from the Ridolfi affair to the Babington letters that finally destroyed her. Killing her ended the plots, but it left a body, and a body in the 16th century is not a neutral object. A body is an argument. Bury her secretly in a hole, like a criminal, and you confirm every Catholic in Europe in their belief that England murdered an anointed queen and knew it was murder. Bury her grandly, with full royal honours, and you admit she was what she always claimed to be, a sovereign, wrongfully killed. And there is a third audience, closer to home and more dangerous than either, her son. James VI of Scotland, 21 years old, who never really knew his mother. She last saw him when he was 10 months old, but who is the most likely heir to Elizabeth's own throne, and whose good opinion England cannot afford to lose. James has to be able to say his mother was treated honourably. Elizabeth has to be able to say Mary was treated as a guest, a kinswoman, tragically caught by the law. Everyone needs the funeral to say something. So for 5 months, while ambassadors protested and Elizabeth raged at her own counsellors, she had the secretary who dispatched the death warrant thrown into the tower, insisting she never meant it to be sent, a performance or a truth, historians still argue. For 5 months the body simply waited, embalmed, sealed in close to 900 pounds of lead and coffin wood, in a shuttered room in a Midlands castle, guarded like a state secret. Which it was. And when the decision finally came, it was this. She would be buried as a queen, but the wrong kind of queen, in the wrong place, at the wrong hour. Not Westminster, where English monarchs lie. Peterborough Cathedral, a great church, a beautiful church, but a provincial one, 10 miles from her prison, the same church, and you may find this detail as heavy as I do, where Catherine of Aragon was buried 51 years earlier, the cast-off wife of Henry VIII and the beheaded cousin of Elizabeth I, ending up under the same roof. Peterborough was becoming the place where England put the queens it didn't know what to do with. The heralds would come from London to stage a full royal funeral, mourners, banners, a hearse of velvet and wax, hundreds of yards of black cloth, the whole grammar of majesty. But the body itself, the actual coffin, would travel from Fotheringhay to Peterborough separately, ahead of the ceremony, in darkness on a Sunday night, so that no crowds could gather along the road, no relics could be taken, no demonstration could form around it. The funeral would be royal, the burial would be furtive, both at once. That is the compromise a frightened government makes. Thomas Reeve knows none of these reasons. What Thomas knows, standing in the kitchen with sand on his fingers, is that after dinner the household is gathered in the lower hall, 60-odd people smelling of wood smoke and work, and Sir Amias Paulet's deputy reads from a paper in a flat voice, and the words wagon and Sunday night and Peterborough and such servants as shall be appointed drift over the crowd, and then Master Digby the cook puts one enormous hand on your shoulder and says, "You're on the list, boy. You and Ned and me and 6 others. We go with the coffin." You hear yourself ask why. Why you? Because the wagon needs walkers, torches need carrying, and because afterward there's a funeral feast for 500 to cook at the bishop's palace, and they want kitchen hands sent ahead. He looks at you with something that is almost kindness. And because you don't talk much, they asked for boys who don't talk much. That night you lie on the pallet with Ned snoring beside you, and the heat of the day still radiating down out of the roof tiles, and you stare into the dark, and you count. 171 days she has lain in that room. In 3 days, on Sunday night, they will open the door, and you will help carry her out. The 3 days before Sunday are the busiest the castle has been since February, and the busyness has a strange held-breath quality, because everyone is preparing for something and nobody says its name. Cloth arrives first. A cart from Peterborough on Friday morning, and when the canvas comes off the load you actually stop in the middle of the yard because you've never seen so much black in your life. Bolts of it. Fine broadcloth, coarse cotton stuff, velvet in one precious roll wrapped separately in linen. Black cloth is expensive. The dye alone, true black, deep black, takes woad and madder layered over each other and repeated dippings, and a yard of good black broadcloth costs more than you earn in a month, and there are hundreds of yards on that cart, and this is only the household's share. The heralds in London, you will learn later, have ordered black cloth by the 1,000 yards for the funeral itself, mourning gowns for hundreds of people, most of whom never met the woman they will mourn. Grief, at this level, is an industry. Somewhere in London, drapers are getting rich off this dead queen, and the government is paying because Elizabeth insisted the funeral be at her own charge. Another message, another argument. See how honourably we treat her. You spend most of Friday carrying and cutting. The tailor sent from Peterborough measures the appointed servants with a knotted cord, fast, impersonal, chin up, arms out, and by Saturday evening there is a mourning cassock for you, plain black, smelling of new dye, a smell like vinegar and iron, sharp in the back of the throat, and the cloth is stiff and dense and hangs heavier than anything you have ever worn. You put it on in the garret and Ned looks at you and doesn't make the joke he was assembling. That's the effect of black. It shuts even Ned up. Saturday, the wagon. A great 4-wheeled cart, its sides built up with new boards, the whole of it draped and nailed over with black cloth so that no wood shows, and the wheels greased. You help with this. Work in the thick yellow tallow grease into the hubs with your fingers, the grease body warm from the sun and smelling of sheep, packing it into the iron boxes around the axles. because the one thing this wagon must not do on Sunday night is squeal. Think about that. Somebody, some official somewhere, thought about the sound of the axles. The whole journey has been designed around silence. 4 horses for the wagon, black or near enough, borrowed from 3 different stables. Torches, real torches, links, bundles of tow and pitch on ash staves. 24 of them stacked in the porter's lodge, and their smell reaches halfway across the yard, tarry and sharp. The smell of ships and roofs, the smell of things sealed against weather. And through all of it, the Scots are packing. You see them at a distance, as always, but more often now. Master Melvin, upright and grey, directing the removal of trunks. The Queen's ladies, Jane Kennedy, Elizabeth Curl, the names you know because the whole castle knows them. The women who were with her on the scaffold who bound her eyes with the white cloth. Moving along the far side of the yard with linen in their arms. They have lived in this castle as mourners for 5 months, held here, forbidden to leave, forbidden to bury their mistress, forbidden even to have it over with. Whatever this Sunday is for the government, for them it is the end of a captivity. They're going to walk behind her coffin, and then, at last, they're going to be allowed to go home. On Saturday evening, something happens that you will keep for the rest of your life, and it costs about 4 minutes. You're sent up to the shuttered floor. First time in 5 months. The order comes through Digby. Candles for the chamber, fresh, the last night's worth. Carry them up, hand them to the guard, come straight back, and you climb the great stair with 12 wax candles cradled in your arm like firewood, and the air changes at the landing the way it always changes, cool and still and sweet, and you walk the corridor past the shuttered windows where stripes of late gold light lie across the floorboards like something spilled, and the 2 yeomen at the chamber door watch you come the whole length of the corridor, because watching people come is all they have, and the door is open, just for the changing of the candles, just for housekeeping. But it is open, and while the older yeoman takes the candles from you, counting them against a paper, you look, because you are 16, and you could no more not look than not breathe. The room is small for what it holds. Black cloth on the walls, floor to ceiling, so that the space seems to have no edges, to go back into darkness forever. Candles burning in standing sticks, 6 of them, their flames absolutely motionless in the dead air, each one wearing its little cap of light. And in the middle, on trestles, under a pall of black velvet with a plain cross of white satin sewn upon it, the coffin. Smaller than the room makes it feel, long and low, utterly still, the way only certain things are still. Stones, and the dead. 173 days. You had imagined, in the garret, in the dark, that being near it would feel like being near a ghost. It doesn't. It feels like being near a great weight. That's all. That's what death is up close, after the horror has been boiled away by months. Weight. 900 pounds of lead and oak, and what remains of a woman who was crowned Queen of Scots at 9 months old, who was Queen of France at 16. Your age, Thomas. She was your age, and she had 2 crowns. Who signed her letters, to the end, Marie R. The yeoman finishes counting. Straight back down, lad, he says, not unkindly, and you go. And behind you the door closes with the sound of wood and iron that is much softer than you expected, and that softness follows you down the stairs. That night, your last full night in Fotheringhay before everything changes, there's rain at last. You hear it come across the meadows and take hold of the roof, a long, cool exhale after 3 weeks of heat. And Ned says into the darkness, not snoring for once, "Tom, do you think she can tell that it's finally happening?" And you say, "No, of course not, she's dead." And Ned says, right, and neither of you sleeps for a long time, and the rain goes on quietly filling the river that tomorrow night will run black, past a wagon with greased wheels. Saturday night, after the candles, before the rain, there is one more hour worth living through slowly, and it happens in the kitchen around the banked fire, and it is the closest thing to a wake this queen will ever get from the people who actually shared a roof with her. It is not planned. Wakes among servants never are. It is only that the work is done and tomorrow is too large to sleep toward. And so the kitchen fills gradually, the way a low place fills with water. The maids first, then Digby with the special jug he keeps behind the flour bins. For occasions he alone defines. Then 2 of the yeomen off watch. Then the falconer who has had no falcons to fly for years but keeps the title. Then old Harry the porter's man who remembers the castle under 3 sovereigns. Someone mends the fire just enough to see faces by. The jug goes round in the firelight, and the talk goes round with it, and because you're 16 and silent and useful, nobody sends you to bed, and so you sit on the meal chest in the half-dark, with your arms around your knees, and you listen to the castle remember itself. They talk about her, of course, carefully at first, the way you test ice, and then less carefully as the jug lightens. The maids talk about the small things, because the small things are what maids are given to know. That her linen was finer than anything they had ever washed, and came down to the laundry smelling of orris root. That she kept little dogs and fed them from her own dish. That even here, even at the end, her people addressed her in full state. "Your Majesty, Madame," as though the walls were Holyrood and not a Midlands prison. That she was tall, very tall, taller than most of the men who guarded her, and that in her last years she walked with pain, her legs failing her, so that the queen who had once ridden at the head of armies had to be helped upstairs by her gentlewomen. One of the maids says she saw her once at a window, just standing looking at the river for the better part of an hour, and that she has thought about it every day since February and cannot say why. The yeoman Franks, the one who carried her down the great stair with his eyes shut, though that is tomorrow night, and he does not know it yet. Franks talks about the day itself, because he stood duty in the hall, and the older servants let him, because there is a hunger to have it told by someone who was inside the doors. And he tells it low and plain, staring into the fire, how she came in at the hall door in black with a crucifix in her hand, and every eye in 300 went to her at once, like iron filings when a lodestone passes. How she heard her warrant read without any change of face at all. How, when her women began to weep, it was she who comforted them, she, comforting them, at the foot of her own scaffold, telling them to be glad, that her long troubles were ending, and how at the last, when the black gown came off and she stood in the red, the whole hall drew one breath together. That breath, Thomas. You heard that breath from the kitchen passage. You have carried the sound of it for 5 months, and now, at last, you're being handed the picture that goes with it. Frank stops there. He does not tell the rest, and no one asks him to. And the fire ticks, and the jug goes round. And then old Harry, who has drunk exactly enough, says what old men are for saying, that this castle has never been lucky for crowned heads, and he begins to tell the castle itself, and the kitchen settles in, because Harry telling the castle is a winter entertainment being spent tonight, out of season, and everyone understands why. He tells how the Yorks raised it proud in the old times, falcon and fetterlock, and how in this very castle, in a chamber not 40 paces from where you are all sitting, a queen's son was born on an October day in 1452. Richard, the last Plantagenet, crook-backed Dick as the players have him now, King Richard III, born at Fotheringhay, killed at Bosworth, and his own resting place shuffled and disputed, a king mislaid. How Richard's father and brother, killed in the wars, were brought home to the church across the meadow with such a funeral as this valley never saw before, nor since. Days of it, hundreds of horse, the king himself following the coffins, so that Fotheringhay has already, in living memory of its stones, been the stage for one enormous funeral of state, and how the college of priests that sang for those dead Yorks was swept away in old King Henry's time, and their tombs left to the weather until the present queen, Elizabeth, the same whose warrant ended everything in February, passed through years ago, saw her ancestors' graves lying broken among rubble, and was angry, and paid to have them decently remade in the church where they lie now. Mark it, Harry says, holding the jug like a preacher holds the book. She buried the old queens of her own blood proper when she found 'em spoiled, and come Sunday she buries this one proper too, in her own way, at her own charge. He drinks. Say what you will of great folk, they understand graves. It's the living they can't manage. The fire has burned to a red cave. One of the maids has fallen asleep sitting up, and another spreads a sack over her knees. And it is here, in the sinking quiet, that Mistress Crow, who has been present the whole hour, mending by firelight, saying nothing, ruling the room as she rules it always by mass and gravity, bites off her thread and delivers in 11 words the only eulogy this household will ever compose. She was a deal of trouble, and I'm sorry she's dead. And that is it. That is the wake. Nobody adds to it because there is nothing to add. It is complete, the way an egg is complete. The whole tangled century is in it. The trouble true, the sorrow true, neither cancelling the other, and 400 years of historians will write their shelves of books and not get the balance of Mary Stuart more honestly than the cook of Fotheringhay got it at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night with her mouth full of thread. The company breaks up by no signal, the way it gathered. Banked fire, barred doors, candle ends pinched. On the back stair, climbing to the garret, you pass the second-floor landing one last time, and the changed air touches your face. Cool, still, beeswax, and the faint resin underneath. And for once you do not walk quickly. You stand a moment in the dark, ear to the quiet. And from behind the 2 doors and the corridor there is of course nothing. There has been nothing for 173 days, and yet the landing has never once felt empty, and it does not feel empty now. It feels, you search for it, 16 and word poor and reaching, it feels attended, like a room where someone is expected, which, from tomorrow night, it will never feel again. Whatever this is, this pressure, this attendance, this held note the whole castle has been humming since February. Tomorrow night it ends, and the castle will be just stone, and you find, to your complete surprise, standing in the dark on the landing, that some small contrary part of you will miss it. Then the rain arrives on the roof, and Ned's question is waiting in the garret, and you have already heard how that goes. Sunday, the 30th of July, 1587, is the longest day of your life, and it is long because it is empty. The order of the night is known by mid-morning. The coffin will leave the castle at 10 of the clock, when the last light is gone and the village is abed. The wagon will go by the road through Warmington and Elton and so down to Peterborough, 10 miles, at a walking pace, arriving at the cathedral in the small hours, 1, perhaps 2 of the clock, where the clergy will receive the body, and it will be laid at once into the vault prepared for it. Laid into the ground, you understand, tonight, days before the funeral. The great ceremony on Tuesday, with its lords and heralds and hundreds of mourners, will be performed over a grave already closed, around a coffin of the imagination, a hearse, they call it, a tower of wood and velvet and candles built in the cathedral to stand in for the Queen, while the Queen herself lies already under the pavement. Ned, when he understands this, frowns for a long time and then says, "So the funeral's for the living, then?" 14 years old, and he's put his finger straight on it. All funerals are for the living. This one just admits it. You are dressed and mustered in the inner yard by 9, and the yard is full of black figures and lit by torchlight already, though the sky in the west still holds a last bruise of blue. It is warm. Last night's rain has turned to a rising damp that makes the torch smoke hang low. The wagon stands at the foot of the great stair with its 4 dark horses breathing and shifting, and the sound of a shifting horse harness, that soft, complicated creak and chime, is almost the only sound, because everyone speaks in undertones, and you find that you do too without deciding to. Then they bring her down. It takes 8 men, and it takes a long time. You're not one of the 8. The coffin is borne by yeomen and gentlemen servants, big men chosen for it. But you stand holding a torch at the foot of the stair, and so you see the whole descent, and you will remember it in your body forever, because you can see the weight. That's the thing. You can see it in their necks, in the way each man's breath goes short and rhythmic, in the 2-inch shuffle of their feet feeling for each step, in the low counted words of the sergeant who walks backward before them saying, "Steady, steady, now the turn, steady." 900 pounds coming down a spiral stair, a lead box on the shoulders of men whose faces in your torchlight are shining wet. One of them, a young yeoman called Franks, who has diced with Ned for buttons, has his eyes shut, carrying the Queen of Scots down into the dark with his eyes shut, trusting the voice of the sergeant, and his lips are moving, and you cannot tell if it is the count or a prayer. The torch is heavier than you thought it would be. That's your own discovery of the night, minute by minute. The torch. 4 feet of ash, stave, and a head of burning pitch, and it must be held up and slightly away, always away, downwind of your own face, and within half an hour your right shoulder has a live coal of ache buried in it, and you learn to change hands the way the older men do, low, smooth, without letting the flame swoop. Pitch drips. A bead of it, molten, lands on the back of your hand, and you take a breath through your teeth and let it cool to a hard button on the skin, and do not cry out, because the yard is so quiet, and it seems suddenly the most important thing in the world not to be the boy who cried out. They slide the coffin onto the wagon bed. The wagon takes the weight with a long groan of new boards, settling perhaps a hand's breadth on its axles, and the pall is drawn over, and black cloth is lapped down and made fast with cords, and now it is just a dark shape on a dark cart, and you can't help thinking, that if you met this wagon on the road and didn't know, you would take it for a load of wool. Maybe that's the idea. Master Melvin and 5 of the Scots come down into the yard, cloaked, and take their places behind the wagon. The Queen's ladies are not walking. A small covered cart carries them further back. There is a mounted escort. You count 10, 12 riders, swords under their cloaks, and before the wagon, on a big grey horse, a herald sent up from London, one man in a plain riding cloak with, folded in his saddle-bag, you will later learn, the tabard of a royal officer of arms, carried but not worn. Even the heraldry is travelling in secret tonight. The gate opens, not with a fanfare, with the plain iron music of any gate, the bar lifted, the hinges taking up the load, and at 10 of the clock on a warm, damp Sunday night, the Queen of Scots leaves Fotheringhay Castle for the last time, and you walk out behind her, holding fire. 10 miles at a walking pace is 4 hours, maybe 5 with a load like this, and I want you to walk it with Thomas, because the road is where this story lives. First there is the village. Fotheringhay village is one street, a church, and perhaps 30 houses, and it is supposed to be asleep, and it is not asleep. Nobody comes out. That's the eerie part. No door opens, but as the wagon passes you see them at the windows, a pale half face at a gap in a shutter, a candle hastily quenched, the glint of eyes in an unlit upper room. And at the churchyard wall 3 figures stand in the deep shadow of the yew, perfectly still, hats off, heads bared to a coffin they cannot see and were never told was coming. Word gets out, word always gets out. The whole village knows, and the whole village has silently agreed to know nothing, and to stand in the dark with bare heads while it passes. The great church of Fotheringhay itself watches you go. The lantern tower pale against the clouds, the church of the Yorks, where Richard III's father lies reburied. Even the Queen's road out of her prison runs past other people's graves. This whole valley is thick with buried kings' kindred. Then the village is behind, and there is only the road. And here is where the night gets into you. There are no lights in the English countryside in 1587. I need you to understand what that means. Not few lights. No lights. When the last cottage falls behind, the world beyond your torch simply is not there. The procession moves inside a moving room of orange light. Perhaps 40 feet of visible road, walls of darkness, ceiling of smoke, and everything outside that room announces itself by sound alone. The river to your right, unseen, keeping pace. The creak of the wagon, deep and rhythmic, like the breathing of something very large. 16 hooves in an endless soft clatter. Leather, your own steps. An owl that works the water meadows and cries at intervals with a sound that lifts the hairs on your arms every single time. No matter how firmly you tell yourself, owl, it's an owl, Thomas. You've heard owls all your life. The smell of the night is layered like the smell of the morning, but the layers are different. Pitch smoke, always, in your clothes and your throat by now. Horse, the wet green breath of the meadows. Wood smoke faint from some cottage, and once, passing a field gate, the sudden hot animal wall of penned cattle in the dark, close enough to hear them shift and breathe. Your body settles into the labour of it. This is the thing the histories never tell you, that a night funeral marches for the people in it, mostly work. The torch shoulder, the blister starting on your left heel where the roads. Camber tilts every step slightly sideways. The grit that has found its way into your shoe and which you cannot stop for. The special fatigue of walking slowly, which is worse than walking fast. A horse-pace walk, checked and checked and checked. Every stride shortened to match the wagon, until your legs ache in strange places from all the checking. Every hour, roughly, the torches must be changed. The burnt stubs quenched in the ditch, a sound like a snake, a smell like a struck flint magnified 100 times, and fresh ones lit from old, flame past to flame, and in that moment of transfer, when half the lights are down, the darkness leans in and puts its mouth right against the procession, and everyone feels it, and no one says so. Somewhere past Warmington, Master Digby, walking beside you, tells you quietly to look at the wagon's wheels, and you look, and you understand why he wanted you to see. The greased hubs are doing their work. That whole monstrous load is rolling along the road almost without voice. A rumble, no more, deep and soft. Silent as they could make it, Digby murmurs. Then, after 20 steps, I've cooked for this castle 11 years. I fed her household 7 of them. Never once saw her face closer than across a courtyard. 20 more steps. And now I walk her to her grave. He says it without bitterness, the way you'd note the weather. That is what service is. You feed the great, you carry their fires, you walk their coffins, and you see them, your whole life, only across courtyards. And then, a little after Elton, comes the moment of the journey, the one you'll carry. The escort halts the column. Ahead, in the dark, on the road, lights. 2, 3, small ones, low, not torches, lanterns. The riders go forward at a trot, and there is a pause in which your heart does its own separate work, high and quick, because everyone has thought the same thought all night without speaking it. Catholics. Some band come for the body, for a relic, for a rescue that makes no sense and would be attempted anyway. The government thought that thought so hard it built this entire night around it. And the riders come back, and the sergeant is almost laughing in a whisper, if a man can whisper a laugh. Eel catchers. 2 old men and a boy from the fen edge, lanterning along the ditches for eels, frozen in terror at the roadside while a dozen armed horsemen materialized out of the night around them. As the wagon rolls past, you see them in your torchlight. The 2 old men with their hats crushed to their chests. The boy holding an osier basket in which something dark and alive moves and shines, and all 3 of them staring at the black wagon with an expression you know you will never be able to describe and never be able to forget, because they have understood. Nobody has told them. There is nothing to see but a load under black cloth. But it is a warm July midnight, and there are armed men, and a herald, and torches, and a wagon that rolls quiet as fog, and the old men have understood completely, the way country people understand things, and the older of the 2 goes down on his knees in the wet grass, not to the escort. The escort would frighten a man to his knees, but that isn't it, and everyone present knows it isn't it. He kneels to the wagon, to her. An old Protestant country, 29 years into Elizabeth's reign, and an old man kneels in a ditch at midnight to the passing body of a Catholic queen, because whatever the quarrels of the great, the dead are the dead, and a queen is a queen, and his grandfather would have knelt, and his hands know the way down. The sergeant lets it be. The wagon rolls on, and behind you in the dark, for a long time you can feel that kneeling old man like a warmth on your back. You were sent on this journey, you understand now, precisely so that no one would see it pass. Someone always sees. Somewhere in the 3rd hour between Elton and the Caster Rise, the column halts to breathe the horses, and the halt is its own small world. And I want to stay in it a while, because nights like this are made of their pauses. The wagon stands. The horses drop their heads and blow long shuddering exhalations, and a man goes down the team with a leather bottle, wetting their mouths, murmuring to each one in the tone men keep only for horses and infants. The walkers sit where they stop, on the roadside bank, on milestones, on heels, and the torches are grounded butts wedged among stones, so that the light stops swaying for the first time in hours, and the shadows finally hold still, and the stillness of the shadows is so restful it is almost a taste. Ned finds you. He has been walking further back with the second rank of servants, and he arrives out of the dark and folds down beside you on the bank without a word, which for Ned is remarkable, and for a while you just sit passing the water bottle, feeling the night's damp come up through the grass into you, cool and welcome after the miles. The bank smells of crushed grass and cow parsley and the cold breath of the ditch. Your feet, given rest, immediately begin their complaints. The heel blister tightening as it cools, the road ache blooming up through the soles. And you learn the marcher's bitter little lesson, that it is the stopping that hurts, not the going, and that in a few minutes you'll have to persuade your legs all over again that they belong to you. "Tom," Ned says at last, very low, eyes on the wagon, "is it true what they say about the lead, that they seal them in lead so that—" He stops, starts again. "Will the cook at Peterborough know we've come? Will there be breakfast?" That's Ned. Halfway into the grave fare, and he swerves to breakfast, because 14-year-old courage is a thing built mostly of appetite, and you love him for it and tell him yes. There will be breakfast, and he nods, satisfied on both counts, the lead and the loaves, and the unnamed thing between the two questions is allowed to sink back down into the dark where it belongs. Nearby the herald has dismounted and stands by his grey horse's head, and Digby, who fears no rank when both parties are tired enough, drifts over and offers him ale from the kitchen's own bottle, and the man takes it. And for a few minutes you overhear the sort of talk that never gets into chronicles. The herald, weary, human, his London voice loosened by the hour, saying that he has ridden in the funerals of earls and dukes and never known a business like this one. 5 months, he says. 5 months of letters back and forth, my lords wrangling over cloth and precedents and whether the arms of Scotland might lawfully be shown, and all the while the lady herself lying up there in that chamber, patient as stone. "I'll say this for the dead," he says, handing back the bottle. "They keep their tempers." And Digby laughs his low kitchen laugh, and the herald mounts, and the sergeant's word comes down the line, soft, up, up, and your legs make their arguments and lose, as legs always do, and the torches lift, and the shadows begin to swing again, and the wagon leans into its harness with that deep wooden groan, and the little world of the halt closes behind you like water. The last miles are the strangest, because they are the tiredest, and tiredness at 3 a.m. is a country with its own weather. Sounds arrive from slightly wrong directions. The rhythm of the hooves picks up words and repeats them. Steady, steady, Peterborough, Peterborough, until you have to shake your head to silence it. Once, at the edge of the torchlight, you see a figure standing in a field gate, cloaked, motionless, watching, and your whole skin tightens. And it is a bush. It is a hawthorn bush, Thomas, and it has been a hawthorn bush since before you were born. And once, this one is real, a dog fox crosses the road directly in front of the leading horses, unhurried, insolent, glancing down the length of the procession with the eyes that give back the torch flame flat and green, and every man who sees it makes some small movement, a crossed finger, a touched hat, a muttered word, because a fox crossing a funeral path means something, though no two counties agree on what, and then it is gone through the hedge with a whisk of dark fire, and the wagon rolls on over the place where it passed. You walk the last mile in that state beyond tiredness, where the body goes on by itself, faithful as a mill, and the mind stands a little apart and watches the smoke pour off the torches and unravel backward over the coffin like slow black water, watches the sparks come off the pitch and die in pairs and threes, Watch as your own feet appear and disappear at the bottom of your sight, appear and disappear, appear and disappear. And it is in this state, washed empty, past fear, past even awe, that you crest the rise at Castor and the fen smell finds you, and the three great arches stand up out of the dark ahead, and the single bell begins. And that is why, I think, the men who planned this night in London planned better than they knew. They wanted darkness for secrecy. What they made for the 40 people inside it was something older than secrecy. 10 miles of night strips everything ceremonial away, rank, argument, religion, fear, and leaves only the oldest procession there is, the living, walking the dead to the ground at the pace of a beating heart. Every people that has ever lived has walked that walk. You walked it tonight for a queen, but it is the same walk. Remember that, and the great will never frighten you quite so much again. Peterborough announces itself first as a smell and then as a shape. The smell is the fen. Somewhere past Castor the air changes character, takes on the flat, rich, faintly rotten sweetness of standing water and peat, the breath of that enormous drowned country that begins east of the town and runs, mile after reeded mile, all the way to the sea. And then, on the last rise of the road, the shape, a blackness against blackness, but a made blackness, edged, immense. The west front of Peterborough Cathedral, its three great arches facing you across the sleeping town like three doorways cut in the night itself. You've never seen it before. You've heard of it all your life. The great church of the Golden Borough, monks on this ground for 900 years, since the year 655, sacked by Vikings, burnt and rebuilt. The abbey church raised in the 12th century and turned cathedral by King Henry when he tore the monasteries down. But hearing is nothing. Even now, even as a silhouette, even to a boy staggering with tiredness at nearly 2 a.m, this size of it does something to the back of your neck. Those west arches stand over 80 feet high. The men who conceived them have been dust for 400 years, and their building has simply gone on standing here in the fen, outlasting the kingdom that made it, waiting, as it turns out, for tonight. The town is dark and shuttered, but the cathedral is not. Light stands in the windows of the choir, warm gold in all that black, and as the wagon rolls the last quarter mile you begin to hear, very faint, a bell, not tolling the hour, tolling. One note, slow, spaced, over and over. The passing bell, the death bell, rung across England for every soul at its departing, rung now, months late, absurdly late, beautifully late, for a woman who died in February, because the cathedral has decided that if her body enters at last, the bell shall say so. At the gate of the precincts, clergy are waiting with lanterns, black-habited, breath faintly visible in the small hours' damp. And there is the bishop's party, and there you will learn his name in the coming days. Everyone in the bishop's kitchen speaks of him. There is old Scarlet, Robert Scarlet, the sexton, the gravedigger of Peterborough, a small, tough, ancient man like a root pulled out of the ground, 91 years old this year. 91. He has dug the graves of this church for more than 60 years, and he buried Catherine of Aragon with his own hands in 1536, and he stands now at the door with his spade-hard old hands folded, waiting to bury his second queen. 51 years apart. One man, 2 queens. Nobody else in England can say it. Nobody else in history says it. What happens next happens quickly, and its quickness is the strangest thing of all. The coffin comes off the wagon. 8 fresh men now. The cathedral has provided bearers, and even fresh men buckle slightly at the weight. You see the surprise cross their faces in the torchlight. That flicker of this cannot weigh what it weighs, and it is carried not through the great west doors, but in at a lesser door, and up the length of that vast midnight nave. And I want you to stand where Thomas stands, just inside, holding a torch whose light does not even reach the ceiling. The nave of Peterborough runs over 200 feet. The painted wooden ceiling, one of the oldest in Europe even then. Lozenges of kings and saints and monsters, painted in the 1230s, hang somewhere overhead in absolute darkness, and the procession moves down the centre of all that held black air, a little raft of candlelight on a sea of it, and the bell strikes on, and the voices of the clergy rise thin and small in a space built for hundreds of monks and holding, tonight, perhaps 40 tired people. In the south aisle of the presbytery, near the high altar, the pavement is open. A vault has been made ready, brick-lined, and the mouth of it stands square and black in the floor with planks and ropes beside it, and old Scarlet standing at its head as he has stood at the head of thousands. There is a short service, very short. This is the strangeness the government has ordered, and you are one of perhaps 40 living souls who will ever see it. The actual burial of Mary Queen of Scots, the real one, the lead, and the body in the ground, conducted at 2 a.m. before almost no one, so that the daylight ceremony can be conducted before everyone over nothing. Prayers are read. The Scots stand together, and the Queen's women have come in from their cart, and when the coffin is lowered, ropes groaning around the planks, 4 men paying out line hand over hand, the sergeant steady, steady again, softer than ever. When it goes down into the floor of the church, Master Melvin's composure, which has held for 174 days, breaks, not loudly. He simply bows over his own clasped hands as though someone has set a weight on the back of his neck, and Jane Kennedy puts her hand on his arm, and she's looking down into the vault with her eyes bright and fixed, the same eyes that were the last thing her mistress ever saw, because it was Jane who bound the white cloth over them on the scaffold. You are 16, and you are standing at the edge of the lamplight with pitch smoke in your throat, and 2 blistered feet and a burn button on the back of your hand, and you understand that you are watching the truest moment this entire elaborate month will contain, and that it's being deliberately spent in secret at night, like a coin dropped down a well. They do not seal the vault entirely. Part is left open, boarded over by instruction. You hear the clergy murmur of it, so that at the great funeral on Tuesday, the ceremony can be completed above the grave in the sight of the mourners. Even the masonry is part of the choreography. By 3 it is done. The torches are quenched in a barrel by the door, hiss after hiss after hiss, and the darkness of the nave closes over the light like water. And then, because the world is what it is, somebody says the word that dissolves every solemnity ever assembled: breakfast. And you follow Digby out of the Cathedral of Kings and across the close to the Bishop's Palace, to a kitchen, to bread and cold beef and small beer at 3 a.m, and you eat like a wolf, standing up, swaying, with grave dirt smell still in your nose, because you are 16, and grief is grief, but hunger is hunger, and the living, God help them, are always so relentlessly alive. You are asleep before you finish deciding where to lie down. You wake on sacks in a corner of the bishop's bakehouse with flour in your hair and no idea for 3 full breaths what town you're in. Then the bells tell you. Peterborough's bells, ringing the morning, and under them and around them the sound of a working precinct. Carts, voices, hammering, so much hammering. And Monday, the 31st of July, begins, and Monday is labour from its first minute to its last, and I will give it to you the way Thomas gets it, through the hands. The Bishop's Palace kitchens are preparing to feed the largest gathering Peterborough has seen in a generation. The funeral feast on Tuesday must serve the lords and ladies come from London, the heralds, the clergy, the gentry of 3 counties, their servants, and the 100 poor women who will walk in the procession, hundreds upon hundreds of mouths. And a feast on that scale is not cooking, it is siegecraft. Whole carcasses come in from the shambles, beeves, muttons, veals, the porters staggering, crates of poultry that turn the inner yard into a barnyard of noise and feathers and hot bird smell, fish up from the fen in dripping baskets, pike with their wolf-trap jaws bound shut with rushes, eels in such numbers that you think of the old men on the road, and wonder if their night's catch has ended up here in the Queen's funeral pies. Peterborough was practically built on eels. The Abbey's ancient rents were paid in thousands of them a year, and the fen villages still count wealth in sticks of eels the way other places count sheep. Your work is fires and water and hauling, the same work as Fotheringhay but at triple scale, in kitchens you don't know, among cooks who don't know you, which means you're everyone's boy and no one's. Fetch, carry, turn the spit. An hour at a time at the great hearth, your face scorched and your back chilled in the classic spit boy's misery, basting fat hissing onto the coals and spitting back, your right arm turning, until it is no longer an arm but a hot rope of ache, and the smell of roasting beef so thick and constant that it stops being appetite and becomes simply atmosphere, the air you work in. Pluck, scour, draw water until the well rope prints its twist into your palms. By mid-afternoon your hands have collected the day the way hands do, nicked at the left thumb by a splinter from the fish crates, tender at the right palm where a kettle handle bit through the cloth, the pitchburn button from Sunday night rubbed raw at its edge, and all of it dressed in a permanent glaze of grease and ash that no amount of trough water quite lifts. But twice that Monday the day opens and shows you what it is really about. The first time is at noon, when Digby sends you across the close with a basket of manchet loaves for the clergy, and your path takes you through the cathedral by the south door because it is the shortest way. No other reason. Bread has no reverence. And you walk into the middle of the transformation. They are building the hearse, not a vehicle. In the language of great funerals, a hearse is a structure, a great frame of timber raised in the church over or near the grave, stories high, bristling with spikes for candles, hung and roofed and valanced in black velvet crowned with heraldry, a building within the building, a chapel of night set up inside the day. Carpenters swarm on it. It stands, you crane back your neck, 20 feet and more, square planned, already half clothed in velvet so dark it seems to drink the light of the windows, and painters are at work on shields of arms, the Lion of Scotland red on gold, quartered and impaled with the lilies of France, arms that it has been close to treason to display in England for 30 years, blooming now, panel after panel, under government commission in the greatest church of the Fens. Wax candles thick as your wrist are being set on the spikes by the score. The whole choir smells of sawdust, size glue, paint and honey. That much beeswax in one place smells like a hot meadow. And beneath it all, in the pavement of the south aisle, mute, boarded over, the actual grave, which the carpenters step around all day the way men step around a sleeping dog. You stand there with your basket of bread exactly as long as you dare, which is not long, and a herald's officer in a black gown with a paper in his hand walks past you and says to another, in a London voice, weary, professional, And the mourners by rank, the Countess first, and let the Scots be placed where they can be seen and not heard, and is gone, and you carry your bread on, and that half-sentence lodges in you like the owl cry did. Seen and not heard. Even the grief is being arranged by rank and managed for effect, especially the grief. The second opening of the day comes at evening, and it is Old Scarlet. You are sent to the sexton's lodging with his supper, someone's kindness, or someone's calculation, the old man being much in demand and much in the way, and you find him sitting on a bench outside his door in the last of the light, boots off, ankles white and thin as peeled willow. A man so old that age has stopped being a softness on him and become a hardness, like weathering on oak. He takes the supper. He looks at you with small bright eyes. "You're one of the castle boys," he says. "Walk down with her." "Yes, master." "Sit," he says, and you sit because you're too tired not to, and because something in you wants to be near him the way you'd want to be near a very old tree. He eats slowly. He tells you, unprompted, in pieces between mouthfuls, in a fen voice with 60 years of grave dirt in it, that he was born in the year 1496, that he remembers the monks, that he was a grown man digging in this churchyard before King Henry ever quarrelled with Rome, and that he has buried, by his own reckoning, the better part of 2 whole generations of this town. "I ha' laid down the fathers, and I ha' laid down their sons, and I've made a start on the grandsons. Plague years and sweating sickness years and ordinary years, which also kill everyone, only slower." And then he says the thing you came, without knowing it, to hear. 51 year ago, he says, I buried a queen of this land in that church. Spanish Kate, Queen Catherine, God rest her. January it was, bitter, and they told us then, hush it, keep it low, no state, the king's pleasure. And Sunday night I buried another, and they told us, hush it, keep it dark, the queen's pleasure. He works a shred of beef with the teeth he has left. 2 queens, boy. Both put in my ground quiet, like they was owed money. He looks out across the close at the great dark ship of the cathedral riding against the first stars. Kings and councils can shout a thing or whisper it, he says. Ground don't care. Ground keeps 'em all the same, and keeps 'em a long time. You mind that, and you'll not be over-frighted of great folk again as long as you live. He hands you back the empty dish. His hand, taking yours for a moment in the exchange, is cool and dry, and hard as a spade handle. Get to your bed, castle boy. Tomorrow's the loud part. Tuesday the 1st of August, 1587. The loud part. You are awake before the bakehouse fires, which means you are awake before 4, and from that hour the day accelerates like a cart going downhill. The town is filling, you can hear it fill. Peterborough on an ordinary Tuesday holds a few thousand souls. Today, from before dawn, the roads are bringing in the county. Gentry with their households, farmers, fenmen poled up the waterways, pedlars who can smell a crowd across 3 shires, and the plain curious in their hundreds upon hundreds, because a queen's funeral comes to a town once in a lifetime. And this town, uniquely, incredibly, is having its second. There are men alive in Peterborough this morning, Old Scarlet merely the eldest of them, who stood in these same streets as boys for Catherine of Aragon, and they are explaining it all to their grandchildren at this moment, with the terrible authority of the very old. The kitchens go to war at first light. You are in it and of it. Fires, spits, the great cauldrons of the boiling house seething with fowl, the pastry cooks assembling raised pies like masons building towers, coffin after coffin of pastry. That is truly what the crust is called. A coffin! And no one today finds it strange but you. And then, at mid-morning, Digby pulls you out of the smoke by the shoulder, looks you over, wipes a smear of ash from your cheekbone with his own thumb like a rough father, and says, "You're wanted for the alms row. Clean hands, straight back. Go." Because the procession needs bodies, and a funeral of state is built out of bodies by rank, and at the bottom of that structure, below the lords and the heralds and the gentlemen, there is a place. There is always a place. It is as fixed as the place of the countess, for the poor and for servants. 100 poor women walk today, given mourning gowns for it, paid in cloth and dinner to be the visible humility of the great, and with them ranked and marshalled the household servants of the late Queen and of the castle. You, in your black cassock which still smells of vinegar and iron, carrying nothing, required only to walk and to be seen and to be sorrowful and to be silent, seen and not heard. You wait in the close for 2 hours while the marshals build the procession the way the carpenters built the hearse, timber by timber, and then the bells begin, all of them now, the whole tower, that bronze weight of sound you feel in your breastbone as much as here, and it moves. I could give you the order of it the way the heralds recorded it, rank after rank, but Thomas experiences it as everyone at the bottom of a procession experiences it, as a river he is standing in. What he sees is this: the bishop and the clergy, the heralds of the College of Arms in their tabards at last, gold and scarlet and blue, the royal arms burning on their chests, the only colour in a mile of black, so that they look like men on fire walking through the night. A great banner of Scotland's arms, and the wind off the fen taking it so the Red Lion seems to prowl. Officers carrying on cushions a crown. Not her crown, a crown made for today, gilt and glass standing in for Scotland's honours, exactly as the empty coffin will stand in for her body. And the eye does not know the difference. And that is the entire theology of this day. The eye does not know the difference. Then the chariot. A funeral car draped to the ground in black velvet, drawn by horses trapped in black to their hooves, and on it a coffin under a pall of purple. Purple, the colour permitted only to royalty. And I will tell you now what Thomas already knows, and the crowd does not. It is empty, or rather, it is full of everything except her, full of meaning, full of statecraft, full of the presence of monarchy, and lacking only the woman who has lain under the South Aisle pavement since 2 o'clock on Monday morning, 10 feet from where this magnificent object will come to rest. Behind the chariot the chief mourner, the Countess of Bedford, sent from court to impersonate by rank and proximity the grief of the Queen of England, her train borne up, her face composed, and behind the Countess the true grief, placed where it can be seen and not heard, Melvin, the Queen's physician, her surgeon, her apothecary, the men who opened and preserved her body walking behind its image, and the women, Jane Kennedy, Elizabeth Curl, walking with the particular straightness of people who've decided together privately exactly how they will get through the next 3 hours, and you, far back, in the Black River's tail, walking once more behind Mary Stuart, behind the idea of her this time, through streets walled with faces, faces in windows, faces on walls, boys in trees, the crowd so dense at the corners that the marshal's staves must open the way, and the sound of that crowd is a sound you have never heard before and will never hear again. Thousands of people being almost silent, a sea sound, Shuffle and breath and murmur, and here and there, surfacing out of it, a single sob, or a voice saying, "God rest her," said quickly, half swallowed, because even now, even here, people are not entirely sure what it is safe to say about this particular death. And then the west front of the cathedral is above you, those three vast arches taking the procession in like the tide taking a river, and the sound changes from open air to stone, and the organ is playing, and the nave that you saw drowned in darkness on Sunday night is packed to its pillars with the standing living, and high overhead for the first time you see the painted ceiling, kings and bishops and beasts looking down out of the 13th century on the whole assembly, and the empty coffin is borne up the centre aisle and set within the great black hearse among its 100 candles, and the flames all bow together in the wind of its passing and stand up straight again, and the funeral of a woman 5 months dead and 2 days buried begins. You stand through it, packed in the south aisle among servants and townsfolk, close pressed, shoulder against shoulder, and the standing itself becomes its own slow ordeal, the stones striking cold up through your shoe soles even in August, your knees learning to lock and unlock, your blistered heel announcing itself at intervals like a small bell, and the air thickens minute by minute with people and wax smoke until the candle flames on the hearse wear little halos. And in the middle of the ceremony, the thing happens that everyone will talk about for weeks in kitchens and taverns and privy chambers, the thing that makes this funeral strange even by the standards of a funeral already so strange. The sermon begins. The Bishop of Lincoln climbs into the pulpit, a careful man handed the most impossible preaching assignment in England. Eulogize before the world a Catholic queen executed by his own Protestant state, offending neither God, nor Elizabeth, nor Scotland, nor the truth, or at least not all four at once. And he manages it the way such men manage such things, with fog. He speaks of the frailty of princes. He says he will not judge her inner faith. He commends her to God's mercy. And while he is speaking, there is movement. The Scots are leaving, not with a shout, not with any protest a marshal could lay hands on. Melvin, the physicians, most of the Queen's own household simply turn in their places near the hearse and walk, slowly, with complete dignity, at the pace of a procession, which is the genius of it, because a state funeral cannot object to people walking slowly, down the length of the nave and out of the church. They are Catholics. They will not, even for her, especially not for her, stand as participants in a heretic service. They have walked behind her coffin, which was their duty and their love, and they will not pray by the wrong book over her grave, which would be, as they understand, the universe, a betrayal deeper than absence. So they go and wait outside the doors, in the sun, in the churchyard among Scarlet's ordinary dead, while England finishes its ceremony over their mistress without them. You watch them go, you have an aisle view of exactly this, as if the marshal's placement had one floor and you're standing in it, and the congregation ripples as they pass, a turning of heads running down the nave like wind over barley, and the bishop preaches steadily on into the disturbance, raising his voice just slightly. And this, you think, this is the truest picture of the whole age that you will ever be shown. A church full of English mourning performed at full volume, and a handful of Scots walking out of it in silence, and both sides certain and both sides grieving, and the woman herself beyond all of it, under the pavement, 10 feet from the pulpit, hearing, as Ned would say, nothing at all. Afterward come the rites of ending, and they are physical. and being physical, they land on you harder than any words. The officers of her household break their staves of office. White rods snapped over the open vault, crack, 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 each one a small dry gunshot in the vaulted quiet, the immemorial sign that their service is dissolved, that there is no one left to serve. And cast the pieces down into the grave to lie upon the coffin. Some of those men have carried a staff in her name through 19 years of prisons. You see one of them hold the 2 halves a moment after the break, looking at them as if the snapping had surprised his hands. And then it is over, and the great machine reverses, procession out, banners down the nave, the crowd released into the August afternoon like water from a sluice, and the entire company, hundreds, flows across the close to the bishop's palace, where the tables are laid, and where you, Thomas Reeve, are transformed in the space of one doorway, from mourner back into kitchen boy, cassock off, apron on, because the feast is now, and the feast waits for no grief. If the burial was the truth, and the funeral was the argument, the feast is the exhale. You will remember it as heat, and noise, and hands. The roasts going out on charges you can barely lift, your forearms trembling under beef, the sauce smell of vinegar and sugar and cinnamon, the wreckage coming back, gnawed bones, bread trenchers soaked dark, the wine going out in such rivers that by mid-afternoon the volume of talk from the hall has doubled, and the black-clad company of the morning sounds behind its doors like any wedding. This shocks you for about an hour. Then Digby, catching your face as you stand with a stack of foul dishes, reads it exactly and delivers between shouted orders the second lesson of your week. That's not disrespect, boy. That's relief. 5 months this realm has held its breath over that woman. Let them eat. And he takes the dishes out of your arms because you have stopped moving, and moves you on with a knee like a man herding a bullock, and the day roars on. By dark your legs are wood, your burn is weeping under its button, your ears ring, and you have eaten your own supper, a torn half capon, cook's privilege, the best thing you've tasted in a year. Standing in the yard watching swifts hunt midges in the last light over a cathedral that now holds 2 queens. And late, very late, before you sleep you do a thing you could not explain to anyone, and do not try to explain to yourself. You walk back into the church. The doors are not yet barred. Men are still quenching candles on the great hearse, and the smell of 100 dead wicks hangs in the dark like the ghost of the whole day. You go to the south aisle. The pavement is closed now, the stones relaid, the mason's sand still gritting faintly underfoot, and there is nothing to see. No effigy yet, no inscription yet, just floor. You stand there anyway, a kitchen boy alone in the biggest building he's ever entered, and you find you are counting again. 175 days from the axe to the ground, 10 miles of dark road, 900 pounds of lead, 2 queens under one roof, one old man who buried both. You don't pray, exactly. You're not sure what you'd be allowed to ask. You just stand a while with her, the way you'd sit with anyone at the end of a very long journey, and then you go to your sacks in the bakehouse corner, and you sleep like the dead, like the well-guarded, deeply buried, finally resting dead. Wednesday, the day after the funeral, deserves its own telling, because Wednesday is when you see what a great event looks like the morning after, and the morning after is where the 16th century shows you its true face. The town is still full. The lords and their trains begin rolling out southward from first light, coach after coach, but the county crowd lingers, and Peterborough's marketplace has decided, with the frank instinct of marketplaces everywhere, that a queen's funeral is excellent for trade. You are sent out twice on kitchen errands and both times have to shoulder through it. Peddlers bawling, a man selling printed ballads, ink barely dry, the woeful end and solemn burial of the Scottish Queen, a penny the sheet, and he cannot hand them out fast enough, and you hear him telling one buyer, confidentially, man to man, that he had it from one who stood within the church, every word true, and the ballad, when a customer reads it aloud to his friends beside you, describes the coffin being borne into the grave before the weeping thousands, which you happen to know is not what happened, because you stood over that grave at 2 on Monday morning, with pitch smoke in your throat while it happened before 40. The printed lie is 2 days old and already outrunning the truth on fast legs, and it will outrun it forever. And you stand there in the crowd with the truth inside you like a swallowed coin, and you discover the particular loneliness of the eyewitness, which is one more thing they don't tell you about history, that being present at it mostly means knowing, for the rest of your life, exactly what the songs got wrong. There is darker trade too. In the alehouse yard where the castle servants are quartered, a thin-faced man in a good enough coat finds the company of serving men and buys ale, and lets it be known, in a soft roundabout way, never quite saying it, that certain gentlemen, collectors, men of piety, he says, foreign men of piety, would pay, and pay in gold, for any small thing of hers, a glove, a lock of hair, a scrap of anything the blood had touched, a nail from the coffin even. The table goes quiet around him, and Digby, without raising his voice, without even setting down his pot, says, "Everything the blood touched went into the fire at Fotheringhay in February, by order, and we fed the fire ourselves, and if you ask again I'll call the bishop's men." And the thin-faced man smiles and shrugs and dissolves into the yard, off to try the next table in the next town, because there will always be a next table. And Digby drinks and looks at nothing and says to the company generally, "They burned it all so there'd be no relics. Now the want of them has made the want itself a market." He wipes his mouth. "You can behead a queen. You can't behead what folk do with her after." And once, briefly, at a distance, and you will keep this all your life next to the kneeling eel-catcher, you see the Queen's women for the last time. It is that Wednesday evening in the cathedral close, the light going amber and long. Jane Kennedy and Elizabeth Curl come out of the south door together, cloaked for travel, and cross the close toward the bishop's lodging, where the Scots are quartered until their passports come. They walk unhurried. At the middle of the close, Mistress Kennedy stops and turns and looks back at the church, at the whole towering mass of it, holding what it now holds, for the length of perhaps 10 heartbeats. You cannot see her face. You do not need to. 19 years she followed her mistress from castle to castle, prison to prison. She held the cloth. She walked the 10 dark miles. She stood in the aisle while the wrong prayers were read, and walked out, and stood in the sun among strangers' graves until it was over. Now there is nothing left to follow. 10 heartbeats she gives the building, and then she turns and walks on, and the door of the lodging takes them in. She will cross to France in time, and tell the story of the scaffold to the French court with such steadiness that hard men weep, and marry and drown years later, crossing a Scottish firth on her way to serve the sun, sent for by King James himself to tell him of his mother's end. The sea takes her before she reaches him. History is not kind with its symmetries, it is only exact. You know none of that. Watching, in the amber light, with a sack of flour on your shoulder. You only know that you have seen faithfulness walking in a plain cloak, and that it looks like nothing at all, like a tired woman crossing a yard, and that this is evidently how the largest things travel through the world, unmarked, at evening, carrying their own weight quietly, while the ballad sellers shout the counterfeit in the square. The flower is cutting into your shoulder. You shift it and go on. Even revelation waits on supper. You are kept at Peterborough 3 more days, scouring and dismantling. A feast takes 1 day to eat and 3 to wash. And on the last morning, before the cart comes to carry the castle servants home, the day gives you one final gift, and it comes, like most gifts in a servant's life, disguised as an errand. The plumbers and glaziers are at work on the cathedral roof. August is roof-mending season, the one dry stretch of the fen year, and the bishop's kitchen owes them their morning bread and ale, and someone must carry it up. Up. The word goes round the scullery, and every man discovers urgent business elsewhere, because up means the tower stairs, and the tower stairs mean 200 and more steps of spiral in the dark. You are the boy. You're always the boy. You take the basket. The stair is a stone corkscrew just wider than your shoulders, lit by arrow slits, each step hollowed in its middle by 400 years of feet, and you climb with the basket braced on your hip, and your free hand reading the cold central pillar like a blind man, round and round, breath going ragged, thighs burning, the light from each slit sweeping across you and gone, until a door of grey planks opens onto wind, and there is the world. You come out onto the leads of the central tower into a light so wide it makes you grab the parapet, and Peterborough is below you. The whole town at once, small enough to cover with your 2 hands, the marketplace, the long street, the wharves on the river, smoke standing up from 100 breakfast fires and leaning east, all of it in the wind. The workmen take their bread and ale off you with fen-voiced thanks and go back to their soldering. The smell of hot lead and tallow sharp on the wind, and nobody tells you to go back down, and so for a few minutes, for the only time in your life, you stand on top of everything you know. West. The road home. You can follow it with your eye through Caster toward the low wooded rises that hide the Nina Valley, and somewhere under that green haze 10 miles off, Fotheringhay stands over its river with a shuttered floor that can be opened now and aired and forgotten. East, the other half of creation, the fens, going flat and silver green and enormous to the edge of the sky, water shining in 1,000 channels, the whole drowned country that fed eels to the abbey for 900 years, and beyond it, invisible, the sea, and on that sea, though you cannot know it, though not even the Privy Council fully knows it yet, Spain's great fleet is building, the armada that will come next summer, in 88, in part, they will say for her, the Queen under the pavement below your feet, the Catholic martyr whose death gave King Philip one more reason. The future is out there on that horizon, gathering, and from up here it looks like nothing at all. It looks like weather. Directly below, foreshortened, the churchyard, the green rectangles, the leaning stones, and a small figure moving among them with a barrow. Scarlet at 91, doing what Scarlet does, because ordinary people have gone on dying all week and their graves will not dig themselves. Kings and councils shout or whisper. Ground keeps them all the same. You stand there until the wind has scoured the kitchen out of your head, and then you go down the corkscrew into the dark, and the dark takes you back. The cart home is slow and jolting and full of talk, and Ned falls asleep against your shoulder before Castor, heavy as a sack of meal, and you let him lie. The road you walked in torchlit silence unrolls now in ordinary daylight, banal and beautiful. Harvest starting in the fields, women gleaning, a dog barking at the cart from a gate at Elton, and at one bend near the water meadows you recognise with a jolt in your chest the stretch of ditch where the old eel catcher knelt. It is just grass. There is nothing there. There will never be anything there. No stone, no record. You may be the only person alive who will remember all his life that on that spot at midnight an old man knelt to a passing queen. History is mostly this, you begin to understand. Mostly unmarked grass and someone who remembers for a while. Fotheringhay, when the cart breasts the last rise, looks different, and it takes you a moment to see why. The shutters. The second floor stands open. Windows that were blind for half a year have their casements swung wide, and curtains is plain, ordinary, moving in and out of them with the breath of the valley, and the castle looks, for the first time since you came to it, like a building rather than a held breath. The Scots leave within the month. You're in the yard the morning their carts go, and Master Melvin, grey and straight, passing along the line of household servants with a word for this one and that, stops, to your terror, in front of you. He looks at you a moment. You carried a torch on the Sunday night, he says. It is not a question. The man forgets nothing. He has had nothing to do for 5 months but remember. Yes, sir, you say. He nods slowly, as if filing you in some final ledger. She was served by great folk all her life, he says, and betrayed by no small number of them. But that night she was well served. And he touches your shoulder once, light as a bird landing, and walks on, and the carts roll out through the gate towards Scotland and France and the rest of their lives, and you stand in the yard with your ears burning, richer by one sentence than by any wage you have ever been paid. And then the seasons take over, the way they always do, the way they took over after every plague and every coronation and every grief there has ever been, because the year does not attend funerals. August is harvest, and the castle empties into the fields the way it does every August, and you are lent out with the rest to the domain farms, and for 3 weeks your world contracts to the width of a stubble row, the hook in your hand, the straw scoring red lines up your forearms, chaff in your collar, in your eyelashes, in your bread. The itch of it at night like lying in fire. The taste of harvest ale drunk warm in the shade of a hedge at noon, with your back against a wheel, and your whole body ringing like a struck pot. It is brutal, and it is wonderful, and somewhere in the middle of it you notice that you've gone 2 entire days without thinking of the shuttered floor, and you stand a moment in the stubble with the hook hanging from your hand, unsure whether to feel guilty or healed, and an older reaper knocks your shoulder going past and says, "Keep on, boy," and you keep on, and that too is an answer. September, the castle takes its winter shape. You are set to salting and smoking. The killing month coming, pigs and beeves that cannot be fed through winter going into brine and up chimneys, and your hands crack at every knuckle from the salt. Fine red seams that sting at each clench of the fist all autumn long, and Mistress Crow gives you goose grease for them in an old horn box, gruff as ever, and you catch her, once, standing in the door of the lower hall looking at nothing, and you understand that everyone in this castle is doing the same slow work you are doing, putting the year away in salt. October, the talk turns outward. The carters bring it up the road with the sea coal and the wine. Spain, always Spain now. Ships gathering at Lisbon like starlings before winter. Beacons being overhauled on the hilltops, the county musters called and drilled. Ned goes to gawp at the Oundle men shooting at butts and comes back drunk on it, full of talk of pikes and calivers, 14 years old and starving for a war the way only a boy who has never seen one can starve. And in all this talk her name keeps surfacing, the Queen of Scots, the martyred queen the Spaniards call her, the serpent the preachers here call her, and you listen from the edge of rooms, and you find you cannot use either word. You carried a torch beside 900 pounds of her silence. She has stopped being an argument to you. That is either a great wisdom or a great uselessness, and at 16 you cannot tell which. And I will let you into a secret from 400 years on, Thomas. No one ever can. November, the first hard frost, and the well rope stiff as a rod in your hands. December, and at Christmas the castle keeps a modest feast, and Digby, flushed with wine, tells the whole kitchen the story of the funeral feast at Peterborough, with himself considerably nearer the centre of events than you remember him, and catches your eye across the fire in the middle of the best exaggeration, and winks, and you keep his secret because that is also what service is. And in the black end of January the year comes round, and on the 8th of February, 1 year to the day, nothing happens. That is what strikes you. No bell, no word, no mark. You are scouring pots in the grey morning light, and you realise halfway through the second pot what day it is, and you stop, sand gritting under your still fingers, and around you the kitchen clatters on and the river runs, and the world has already, in one single year, begun to forget. And you stand there and privately, silently, uselessly, magnificently you remember the smell of burning velvet, the air changing on the landing, steady, steady, now the turn, the lantern light of the eel catchers, the bell over the dark town, crack, 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 the white staves breaking. An old man's hand like a spade handle, you hold it all for the length of one held breath, a whole year in one lungful, and then you let it go and pick up the pot because the living, God help them, are always so relentlessly alive, and there is dinner for 60 to get. Here is what happens afterward, in the years Thomas cannot see, so that you can carry it down into sleep with everything squared away. The Armada comes the very next summer and is broken by weather, by gunnery, by luck. And the beacons Ned drooled over are lit for warning and then soon enough for triumph. Old Scarlet goes on digging. He buries his neighbours through the Armada year and the hungry 90s, and clean past the death of Queen Elizabeth herself, and lays down his spade at last in 1594, aged 98, and the town he buried buries him, and paints his portrait high on the cathedral's west wall. Spade, keys, whip, and skull, where you can see it to this day, the grave digger of 2 queens keeping his door, and the queen under the pavement does not stay there. In 1603 Elizabeth dies childless, and the son who never knew his mother, James, 10 months old when she last held him, becomes King of England, the exact outcome all those plots and axes were meant to prevent or secure, arriving in the end by simple patience. And in 1612 King James has his mother taken up from Peterborough, out of Scarlet's ground, and carried south in state to Westminster Abbey, and laid in a tomb of white marble grander than the one he gives Elizabeth, the 2 cousins who never once met in life, lying now a few yards apart in the same church forever, which is either reconciliation or the longest argument in England, depending on the light. So the strange funeral of 1587 becomes in the end a way station. The empty coffin, the midnight wagon, the sermon walked out of, the broken staves, all of it a hinge between one age and the next. And in Peterborough, in the South Aisle, the vault Thomas stood over stands empty to this day, marked and remembered, the grave of a queen who is no longer in it, 10 feet from Catherine of Aragon, who still is. Unmarked grass and someone who remembers for a while. Then stone and everyone remembers, wrongly, forever. That is the whole machinery of history, and you have now seen both ends of it. But we are not quite done with Thomas, because there is one more evening I want to give you, an ordinary one, chosen almost at random from the spring after, because sleep should be entered through an ordinary door. It is a mild evening in April of 1588. The shop of the day is shut, which in a castle means the last pots are scoured, the fires banked, the bread sponge set for morning under its cloth, the doors barred, the watch set. Supper was peas pottage and yesterday's bread and a heel of cheese, eaten standing, as always, in the passage, as always, and it was enough, which is a word you have come to respect more than any grander one. You have an hour now that belongs to nobody. Ned is off pestering the armoury. The garret will be stuffy till midnight. So you do what you have started doing on such evenings. You climb to the wall walk on the riverside where the watch tolerates you because you bring them the ends of loaves, and you lean in an embrasure worn smooth by 200 years of leaning men, and you watch the valley put itself to bed. The Nene is high and quick with spring, talking to itself under the walls. Swallows are back, cutting and stitching over the water. Down in the meadows a heron stands in the last light with the patience of something carved. The village sends up its supper smoke. Somewhere a door bangs. A woman calls a child in. A dog answers a dog across the river. And behind you the castle. Aired now, ordinary now, just stone and duty. Ticks and settles as its walls give back the day's sun. Your hands on the parapet are not the hands you brought from Oundle. 2 years of fire and water and salt and rope have rebuilt them, broader, seamed, the pitch burn on the right one healed to a small pale coin you will carry all your life and never once regret. Your body is doing that quiet trick that bodies do at day's end when they've been used hard and fed enough, unclenching joint by joint from the feet upward, aches surfacing one by one to report and be dismissed. The heel, the spit shoulder, the salt cracks, each one a small proof of the day. None of them a grievance. You think in the unhurried way of tired evenings about the year behind you, and you find that it has settled in you the way heavy cargo settles in a hold. It no longer shifts. You are part of a thing that will be in chronicles. You know what the chronicles will not. The weight of a torch at the second hour. The sound 8 men's breathing makes on a spiral stair. That the wheels were greased with tallow so a kingdom could keep a secret from its own villages, and that the secret lasted exactly as far as the first churchyard wall. That an old man knelt in a ditch, and an older man made the grave, and a boy from Oundle stood in the dark between them and forgot to be afraid. And you think, leaning there, 16 going on 17, while the light goes down the valley like a tide, that whatever comes now, the Spanish summer everyone dreads, the years of your indenture, the whole unguessable rest of it, you can probably carry it. Not because you are strong, because you have learned what things actually weigh. Most fears weigh nothing. Most true weights can be carried by 8 men and a steady voice counting. That is nearly everything you know, and it is more than most men are ever taught. The heron lifts off the meadow at last, hauling itself up the air with those slow oars, and rows away downriver toward Peterborough, toward the fens, toward the sea, and you watch it out of sight, and then you go down to your bed. The garret is warm and smells of the day. Tallow, straw, boy, the ghost of the kitchen in your own hair. Ned is already down, already snoring, 14 and bomb-proof. You stretch out on the pallet in your shirt and the straw ticks and settles under you, finding your shape, the shape it has learned. Through the little window, 1 star, then 2, arriving in the deepening blue like the first candles being lit in a very large, very dark church. Your eyes close, and the castle begins its night around you, the night it has kept for 200 years and will not get to keep much longer. Because I will tell you this last secret, listener, gently, since Thomas will never need to know it. Fotheringhay itself does not last. Within a few decades it stands abandoned. Within a century it is down, quarried away, sold off stone by stone, until nothing remains on the hill above the Naney but grass and a mound, and 1 lump of masonry behind a rail. The great hall where a queen knelt at the block, the shuttered floor, the kitchen, the garret under the leads where 2 boys are sleeping now, all of it, grass. Sheep graze there this evening. The river still runs past, saying the same things. Some things don't change. The river doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. The sounds of the castle grow fainter, or maybe you're just listening less. The watch crosses the yard below, heel and sole on cobble, the same unhurried tread as every night, and the sound is not a warning any more, has not been a warning for a long time. It is just the castle's pulse, steady, keeping, and your own pulse slows to walk beside it. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have work that needs your hands, and a friend snoring at your side, and people who expect you at the fire before dawn, and a small pale coin of a scar to prove that once, on a July midnight, you carried light for a queen the whole world was afraid of, and it was, after everything, only weight, and men carried it, steady, steady. Now the turn all the way to the ground. That's more than most. That's enough. Tomorrow there will be fires to wake and water to draw. Tomorrow there will be bread and bells and the river. Tomorrow. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only the straw finding your shape, and Ned's slow tide of breath, and the dark coming up sweet and total, like deep water without any cold in it. Let it come. Let sleep take you the way the current takes a boat that has finally been untied. Let the day's aches lay themselves down one by one. Let the counting stop. No more days numbered, no more steps, no more bells. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. Centuries will pass. The castle you sleep in will become grass. The road you walked will be paved and lit and driven by machines no one in your world could dream. The fens will be drained, the plagues conquered, the axes put in museums behind glass, but people will still live in that valley, still work until their hands are marked with it, still stand on high places and look at the road home, still fall asleep at night tired and warm and small under enormous stars, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. So sleep. The way Thomas Reeves slept in his garret above the buttery on straw, beside his friend, 439 years ago tonight. You've earned this rest. Take it. And dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.